I was saying, as we were passing out flowers, and you did a great job. You did a great job passing out those flowers. As I was saying, today is Mother's Day, and it's a day that we give thanks. It's a day for celebrating. Celebrating the gift of mothers. You know, I know that for many of you, today is actually a day that is of mixed emotions. All of us have had mothers. Some of us have had really good mothers. Ones that were examples not only to us, but to other people as well. Some of us have had to say goodbye to our mothers already as they pass from this life to the next. Some of us, I don't know if anybody here, nobody's actually told me, but I have met people who have had some really not so great moms. I'll put it that way. When they were looking for love, they did not find it in their own mother, their own birth mother. And they had to find it in other places. Some of you here, in fact, I think almost all of you here, excluding the men now, are mothers yourselves. Mothers not only to those who are your own children of blood, but mothers to many other children who look to you, who watch you, who learn from you. Your heart has probably gone out many times to many children in many different places. And I realize that as we celebrate Mother's Day today, not all people, not all women, have been able to become mothers. And those that have been able to bear their own children have sometimes had to bear an additional pain in their life of burying their children before themselves. And so I realize as I've realized over time, today is a day of mixed emotions. It's a day when we celebrate and we give thanks for mothers. And it's a day that we celebrate what society generally associates with mothers. Their presence with us, a presence that lasts long after they're not around us anymore. You know, often when we are put to the test of trying to make out a list of what it is that we love about our mothers, we'll probably have lots of different answers, but we'll probably have some common ones as well. And as I was reading through some magazines and the newspaper even, I saw that there were some articles about mothers in them over the past few weeks here. And I saw that in our society, we have some generalizations that we make of mothers. What it is that we look to receive from mothers. What it is that we give thanks for in our mothers. What qualities we see in a mother. And I think if we were to take those lists and we were to compile them, some of the things that we would see that they had in common was that a mother is someone who is loving and caring and nurturing and compassionate and comforting. Or at least that's what society looks for in a mother. That's what a society generally expects from a mother. It's not to say that fathers don't act in this way. But this is a general list of what society expects from mothers. You know, the other day I was over at Chick-fil-A. I like to go over there with Josiah. It's a great place for kids to play. It's a safe place. And there's usually always some other kid there for Josiah to romp around in that little playroom with. And the other day I went there to join Wendy and Josiah for dinner. They got there before I did, and when I sat down for dinner, Josiah was still romping around in the playroom, and Wendy started telling me about what happened when they got there earlier on. Josiah was in there, and there was a little toddler in there with him, and the little toddler started trying to mimic everything that Josiah did. Everything. If Josiah bounced up and down, the little toddler tried to bounce up and down too. There was a point when Josiah tried to climb up the slide, and he did a great job of it. And the little toddler, just a little thing, climbed up there too. And then when he was sure of himself, he started to follow Josiah up the slide. Now, if you've ever been to the Chick-fil-A over in Roanoke Rapids, you know that once you get to a certain point, you can't see the children anymore. They're invisible from your eyes. And we were surprised that this little toddler went beyond our sight. Went right up there after Josiah. But just a few seconds later, here comes that little toddler again down the slide. He hops off the slide and he runs over to where his mother is sitting in the little booth area next to the play area. Nothing's wrong. He's not hurt. He just goes over and he pats her knee. And then he turns around and he runs off after Josiah again. All he needed was the assurance that she was still there. The fact that she was there comforted him. The presence of his mother. You know, when I was thinking about that motherly quality, I couldn't help but be reminded, as I was reading about Jesus and the shepherd, of a story that was told a long time ago by a man named Morton, where he described encountering a shepherd in a valley near Jericho. He said the shepherd was leading his flock down one hillside and up the next hillside. And Morton was right there in the valley watching this whole thing unfold before him. He said that as he came down the hillside, the sheep were, that whole flock was just right there with the shepherd. And then the shepherd started up the other hillside, and he stopped, and he looked back, and that whole flock had stopped. They had found some tasty grass to munch on, and they weren't moving. They weren't budging. They'd forgotten all about their shepherd. And so he said that the shepherd, at that point when he stopped, he looked back and saw that the flock wasn't following him. He called them. And he said it was in this high-pitched voice that only the flock would understand. And they all perked up, they looked up and around, and they saw that their shepherd was right there. And then they looked back down, and they just start to munch it again. All except for this one that had a bell around its neck, and it followed up to where the shepherd was. And when it got there, the shepherd continued on around the bend, out of sight of the flock. And when he got out of sight, he gave that high-pitched call again. And like before, all the animals in the flock looked up, and this time they saw the shepherd wasn't there. And immediately there was a stampede. Then they started running towards where they heard the voice. And just like that, they were gone. They felt, this flock felt that as long as they could see their shepherd, as long as he was in their sight, everything was okay. But when he was out of their sight, they were quick to follow his voice. Much like the mother at Chick-fil-A. The shepherd is a comfort to his sheep. Today we hear Jesus talking about the image of a shepherd as he talks to the people that are gathered around him. And as I hear him speak, I hear him talking not only about how people picture him, but how do they see God as well? Because every time Jesus speaks, everything that he does to show the heart and mind of God. So in picking this particular image, he's thinking not simply about himself. He's thinking about what people will think of God. Now, when it comes to God, I have found that a lot of people like to use the image of a man or a father. Maybe you were raised up like I was, on that male imagery. I know that some people will literally see a picture of an old man with a long beard sitting on a throne when they think of God. But I've come to learn that if this is all that we picture when we imagine God, then we're missing out on the bigger picture of who God really is. In our passage today, we see some of the same attributes that we give to mothers in our society associated with Jesus, and thus with God. In particular, we see Jesus likening himself to a shepherd in our passage today. And as I've come to study about shepherds in that day and time and in that part of the world, shepherds, the love that a shepherd has is a lot like the love that our society associates with a mother. A shepherd cares for his sheep. Sheep weren't raised in the Middle East to be eaten as much as they were raised for their wool. And so a shepherd had a long-term relationship with their sheep. They would get to know them. They'd know their personalities. They would give them names like Little Blackfoot and Little Brown Ear. And they had a close relationship with them. Many times it was likened to a parent and their children. That was how dear the sheep were to the shepherd. Morton himself says that when he talked with a shepherd one time, that he described these are my children. The love they had for their sheep was a lot like the love that a mother has for a child. And so we can understand why the sheep, when they hear the voice of the shepherd, they follow. They know and they trust the voice of the shepherd because they know and they trust that he loves and cares for them. I found it interesting that the people listening to Jesus in our passage today were actually confused by his words. Did you catch that in the passage? In between when he talks about being a shepherd and being a gate. It says they were confused. And I found myself wondering, what is so confusing about listening for the voice of a shepherd or listening for the voice of Jesus? And then as I began to think about it, I began to think about how perhaps what makes it confusing is not the analogy as much as the fact that there are many voices all around us and even within us to listen to. And it was the same thing in Jesus' day and age. The passage that I read to you this morning follows a passage I read to you not too long ago about Jesus healing a blind man. And after he heals that blind man, the people around say, "Are you really the blind man that used to be out at the gate?" And they take him to the religious leaders, and the leaders of their people begin to criticize Jesus at that point in time because he didn't do it in the proper way. He healed on a Sabbath, on a day of rest. And they began to have all kinds of words about this man, Jesus. There are many voices to listen to. Jesus knew the situation when he came there. He speaks these words right after that blind man had been kicked out of the synagogue for what he believed about Jesus. Some of the voices that we hear have a great deal of followers, and they may sound convincing. Some of the voices may not be so popular, and they still vie for our attention. You take any subject, you take any topic, you take any decision that you have to make in life, any way in which you seek direction. And there are a number of different opinions out there as to what direction you should take. Take, for instance, we just had an election last week. An election for local leaders. And newspapers and people's yards were littered with all kinds of information, all trying to rally support around particular people and around particular voices. So how do we know which voice to listen to? Which one to believe? How do we know the voice of our shepherd amidst all the other voices all around us, all clamoring for our attention? When Jesus says that he is like a shepherd to those that follow him, he speaks of a deep love and commitment to the welfare of those under his care. At one point in today's passage, he says that he is not like those that came before him, who were thieves and bandits, who came only to steal and to kill and destroy. I learned in my studies that not long before Jesus, there were several that came claiming to be the Messiah. And they gathered lots of people to follow them. They rounded them up, and they had lots of support. And Jesus, in this passage right now, is saying he's nothing like these others that have come before him. For they supported violent opposition to the Romans. For them, it was nothing to take from others what you wanted, to kill so that you could get what you wanted, to destroy so that you could preserve something for yourself. But Jesus says that he came so that people might have life and have it abundantly. Jesus came not to take life away, but to give it. And give it in greater abundance. You know, I think of Jesus in this way, and in particular, discerning a voice. I'm reminded of another shepherd story. One that I learned a while back. It's a story about a shepherd who wants to lead his flock across this stream. And so he does what any shepherd would do. He walks ahead of them to lead the way. But the flock doesn't follow. And so he calls just in the same way that other shepherd called to them, that voice that they knew. And prompts them to come and follow. And they still don't follow. So the shepherd goes back to the flock. Picks up one of the little lambs. Cradles it in his arms and carries it across the stream and goes to the other side. He lays that little lamb down safely on the ground. And when that little lamb is finally down on the ground, it begins to cry out for its mother. And suddenly, on the other side, that flock that is still over there, the mother perks up and notices her child is on the other side of the stream. Before, the entire group of them were conquered by their fear. And now, it is her love for her child that overcomes that fear. And she begins to cross that stream to the other side. And as soon as she makes that bold movement, the rest of the flock begins to follow. I'm reminded in this old story of the power of a mother's love. And how a mother's love, that type of love, can be used to overcome many fears and obstacles. And when asking the question of which voice to follow amidst the numerous voices that are all around us, clamoring for our attention, I fall back to our passage today and I ask, which one leads to life? Which one leads to love? The expression of it. Which one supports giving life instead of taking it away? Which one supports the welfare of all people and not just what I'm comfortable with, but what satisfies me? Today, as we celebrate Mother's Day, I invite you to celebrate not only the presence, but the voice of mothers. And the voice of those who have heard the shepherd's voice and have lived out Christ's sacrificial love for the benefit of all. all children. And let us give thanks today. Let us give thanks today that we have a God who not only gives us that kind of motherly love that we seek, but gives us life. And seeks for us to have more than just existence, but abundant life. A life worth living. And calls us all to be of the same heart and mind that was in Christ Jesus our Lord. So that we might continue to be a voice, calling people by name, calling them to greater love and greater life. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.